Well, now we want to take a look at some of the different ways to go about the income approach. Y'all, there are two methods to evaluating property based on income approach. And y'all, we're going to take a look at both of these. I'll tell you at least one of them you're probably not going to be dealing with. Y'all, not most agents, certainly on a day-to-day basis. But one of them you may very well or probably should be dealing with. But anyway, we're going to talk about these. I will tell you, just starting out with this section here, if you don't have a calculator in front of you, you need to get one. Okay? You're going to need a calculator. Y'all, we're going to be doing some math. And y'all, for whatever reason, a lot of people struggle with the kind of math that we're getting ready to deal with. And I honestly don't really understand why. I think the key to understanding math, or at least this type of math, is just memorizing formulas. Okay? If you know the formula, and we're going to take a look at it, but if you know the formula, then you should be able to extract the information out of the question, the information they provide, and plug it into the formula. Because, and I know we've talked about this before, but if you're provided with two components of three components, if you know the information for two of the three things that are required, then you should be able to figure out the third, right? And again, we're going to take a look at this formula here in just a little bit, but you do need to make sure you have your calculator. Go ahead and get it. If you need to stop, pause the video to go get a calculator, go do it. But let me also warn you of this. When it comes to using a calculator, my guess is some of you are using the calculator on your phone. And I don't recommend that. First of all, when you go to take the state exam, they're not going to let you take your phone into the testing area. You will have to have a calculator. The reason I'm bringing this up, if all you've been doing in preparation for the state exam, if all the math you've been doing has been on using your phone, the calculator you wind up taking into the test area may not work the same. I'm just telling you, not all calculators work the same. And then you start struggling with that. Well, I can't, the calculator's not doing or giving me the same answer that my phone did. You need to get used to using, while we're practicing and going through this stuff, start using the same calculator you're going to actually take in to do the state exam. Now we'll tell you, and you want to be careful about the calculator you use, that you think you're going to take into the state exam. Typically, PSI will not allow you to take in or use a calculator that has any kind of programmable memory. You just need a plain Jane calculator. All you need is something that will add, subtract, multiply, and divide. That's all you're going to be doing. So if you got one of these calculators that's got 167 buttons on it, at least right now, if that's what you want to use and you know how to use it, go for it. But I'm just telling you, you may not be able to use that calculator on the state exam. If it's got any kind of programmable memory, they're not going to let you use it. So just beware of that. Just get used to using something in the during the class that you're going to be able to use on the state exam. All right. By the way, apparently the reason you can't use these programmable calculators, apparently there's ways to actually program answers or something into those calculators. Blows me away. In fact, I'll just tell anybody smart enough to do that, they should be allowed to do it the way I see it. But anyway, enough of that. Let's talk about this income approach. Well, so what are we doing? Why does the income approach matter? When is it even necessary? Well, obviously, this is what's going to be used for income producing properties, either residential or commercial. Y'all, if it produces income, y'all, an investor, y'all, that's typically who would be buying an income producing property. They really don't care what the value based on sales comparison would be, although it will be used, it'll be part of it. But of the three approaches to value, and we'll probably use all three approaches, again, if we can. But as an investor, I would want to put the most weight on what the income approach produces. Y'all, again, because it's an income producing property. So what are these two methods to the income approach? Well, y'all, the first you see here is the capitalization approach, which is what we're going to talk about first. And then there's another one called the gross rent multiplier. And we'll be talking about that here in just a minute. So why two approaches? Well, y'all, they are very different approaches, I will just tell you. Now, you can use either approach for any kind of income producing property. Okay, let's be clear. You can use either approach. Now, having said that, the capitalization approach is much better used for commercial properties. But then the gross rent multiplier is much better to use for residential income producing properties. Y'all, when I say residential, I'm talking about like a single family home. I'm not talking about like an apartment complex. 1 to 4 units, typically. The best for residential would be gross rent multiplier. Y'all, I could see them asking you that question. Which approach to value might be the best when considering the value for a commercial property or a residential property? So there you go. Now you know. So what does capitalization mean? Y'all, capitalization, and that might be another question they'll ask you, by the way. Y'all, capitalization just means converting income to value. Y'all, if you think about it, I think it's pretty clear. Y'all, the more income this property produces, the more value it will have. I think that's a no-brainer in itself. So, y'all, let's take a look at how does this capitalization approach work? Now, I will tell you, it can get very detailed, and I will also tell you this is probably the one that most real estate agents will probably never even be involved with, and quite frankly, on the rare occasions you might get involved with it, I suggest you get some help. Because, y'all, this is something that, again, can get pretty deep. There's a lot of information that would need to go into this. And it's a pretty detailed way to estimate the value of a property. But again, we're not appraisers. Now, appraisers do this all the time, assuming it's an income property. But real estate agents, y'all, again, we're just going to try to show you kind of the basics of what you need to know for this approach. Well, y'all, you're looking at really two formulas here. Again, I highly recommend you memorize formulas. But, y'all, let's think about this. If we're using the income approach to value, what might be the first piece of information I need to know about that property in order to determine the value? The income. Y'all, well, what's the income? Y'all, that's the first piece of information I need to know. Now, there's 3 pieces overall I need to know, as you see here. But the first piece is, what is the income? But now when it comes to income, there's a difference between gross income, and we can even break that down into gross potential or gross effective. And I don't want to get too deep into that right now. But y'all, the income we're most concerned with or need to know is what is the net operating income. And when I say net income, I'm also referring to the annual. Y'all, so when we're dealing with capitalization, we're dealing with the annual income, not monthly, annual income. So first thing I need to know, what is this property's net annual income? Once I know the income, y'all listen to me. Y'all please hear this. This will help you. Once you know the net income, you will always divide it by something. Y'all write that down if you need to. It's in the formula. You see it right there on the screen. It should be in your book as well. But what will you do with that net income? Divide it. Every single time you will divide it by something. Okay, well then the question now is, well, divide it by what? What is that something? Well, it can only be one of two things. It could be the capitalization rate. And if they provide the capitalization rate to you, then you'll divide the net income by the capitalization or cap rate. A lot of times we refer to, kind of use the short term there. Divided by the cap rate, that will give you the value of the property. Now, if they don't give you the cap rate, they will have to tell you what the value of the property is. Okay? They got to give you one or the other. In the question, they will either give you the cap rate or they will give you the value of the property. Either one. And whichever one they give you is what you will divide the net income by. And then, obviously the one they don't give you is what they're asking you to solve for. This should be easy. So again, what's the first thing I need to know? The net annual income. And then what will I do with it? Divide it by something. And that something will be whatever it gives you in the question. They have to give you one of the two. And it's just that simple. So let's look and see how this might work from a practical standpoint. Let's see if I can write something out here. Let's say I'm trying to figure out the value of this property. And by the way, let me just sort of write this. Remember, what was the formula? Net operating income. Again, now that's annual. And then what will I always do with it? Divide it by something. You could divide it by the cap rate. And if you do that, that will give you the value of the property. Or you could divide it by the value, and then that would give you the cap rate, right? So here's what I like to do. First of all, how many pieces of information are we dealing with here? 3. Every time, 3 pieces of information. So I have to have all 3 pieces of information to know the value of this property. Well, let's say here's my subject property I'm trying to figure out the value for. And what's the first thing I need to know about that property? Income. I need to know what is the net operating income of that property. Well, how will I know that? Well, ask the owner, right? Now I say ask the owner. An appraiser's not just going to take their word for it. They're going to have to produce some paperwork, income taxes, tax returns, some kind of evidence of what the income is. But at the end of the day, you're going to get it from the property owner, right? So, let's just say in this example, we'll go with $70,000 was my annual net income. Well, obviously, if I'm trying to figure out the value, the next thing I need to know is the cap rate. And then I can figure out the value of the property. Okay? So how do I figure out the cap rate? Where am I going to get that from? Well, pretty easy. Very similar to the sales comparison approach. I'm now going to look for comparable properties. Similar properties, at least 3, but maybe 3, 5, 6, something like that, that have recently sold. Now again, what is recent? Typically within 6 months. Okay? I'm not saying you can't use a property that sold more than 6 months ago. It's just not going to be nearly as reliable because there could be a lot of changes in the market after 6 months, and quite frankly, within 6 months it could. But we recommend about 6 months is sort of where you need to kind of cut it off and be looking for something within that time period. So I'm going to go look for a comparable property. Let's say I find one. Now, if it has recently sold, all of this information will be, it becomes public knowledge. So you can look it up in the tax records or public records or whatever and find this information. But I'm trying to find the cap rate. What's the first thing I need to know about this income producing property? The income, the net operating income. Let's just say it was $80,000. Again, that's the annual income. But now I'm looking for cap rate. So which one of the two do I need next? The value. And let's just say the value obviously is whatever this property sold for. And to kind of make math a little bit easier, let's say it sold for $800,000. Well, then what would be the cap rate for that property? Obviously, you in your calculator, 80,000, that's the income, divided by 800,000, the value, and then I think that's about 10%, right? So we got a 10% cap rate. Well, now that I know the cap rate, now obviously, again, you would want to do this with 2 or 3 comparables, and obviously you're going to probably get 2 or 3 different cap rates, but they should be pretty close. If you got good comps, the cap rate should be pretty close, and then you can kind of reconcile the 3 and come up with what you believe the cap rate for this market would be. But let's just say in this case we're going with 10%, so now I come back over to my subject, plug that into my cap rate. Well, to figure out the value, again, I take the income, 70,000, divided by the cap rate of 10%, and so we should have a value of 700,000. Right? And that's all there is to it. It's just not that hard. It really isn't. Now, here, I think here's where we have problems, at least on the exam. Not all, but sometimes when you see a question dealing with capitalization, some of them seem like the question might be a paragraph long. Just a long question. And I think that all by itself is what freaks a lot of people out. They're like, oh my God, I don't even want to read all that stuff, much less try to digest all of it. I get it. I get it. Been there, done that. But guess what? You got to read it. But why? But if you think about it this way, there's a reason it might be a long question. Almost a paragraph long, it seems like, at least 3 or 4 or 5 sentences in there. The reason it might be a long question is because, they may not tell you what the net income is. They may not provide that to you. In fact, good chance they won't provide that to you. But rather, what they will provide to you, they'll say you've got this property rents for $2,000 per month. But then you'll see, and obviously if you take the $2,000 times 12 months, and by the way, pay attention to what is telling you what kind of income that is. In this example, we're saying it's a monthly income of $2,000. They may tell you you got a quarterly income or a semi-annual income. Well, what do we have to do? Because what kind of income do I have to have? Annual. So if it's a monthly income, obviously divide that, whatever that amount is, times 12, and there's your annual. If it's quarterly, you got to multiply it by 4. Semi-annual, by 2. Hopefully that we get all that. But now you know your annual income. The problem is, what kind of income will that be? That's gross income. That's not what we want. We want the net income. Well, what is net income? Net income is your gross minus all your operating expenses. So again, one of the reasons why the question seems so long is because they maybe provide all this. Here's all the expenses. They'll list 4 or 5 or maybe 6 expenses. However many expenses they are. You got taxes of this. You got or maintenance of this, a vacancy of that. And anyway, so they will tell you what all the expenses are. And again, you want to pay attention to, are these monthly expenses, quarterly expenses, annual expenses? Because at the end of the day, what do we need to know? Annual. So whatever it gives you, if it's not an annual expense, then you're going to have to convert that to annual. And then we have to subtract whatever all the annual expenses are from the gross income. Got to subtract. And then whatever you're left with, that's your net operating income. Now, here's, when it comes to the expenses, there's one in particular you need to be careful of. And that is if they provide you with a vacancy rate. If they say you got a vacancy rate of 10%, I'm just throwing a number out there. That vacancy is an expense, right? You got units that's not, or months that go by that's not rented. That's costing. That's an expense. So we have to deduct whatever the vacancy rate is from the gross. In fact, that's what we call the gross potential income. Because if we rent it for $2,000 a month, there is the potential of making $24,000 a year, right? $2,000 a month times 12 would be $24,000. But again, that's the potential gross income. Well, that's assuming it's rented every single day of the 365-day year. But if there's one day in that year it's not rented, then you did not make $24,000. Potentially you could, but now we have to figure out, based on how many days it was not rented, what is that rate? What is the vacancy rate? Sometimes you'll hear terms like the effective gross income. The effective gross income, again, is your potential minus the vacancy rate. So for example, in this, what we used here on the slides, the subject the comparable property, the net income was $80,000. Well, obviously it was. But let's just I'm changing gears here a little bit, just try to make a point. But let's say that $80,000 was actually the gross potential income, the annual gross income. Well, the first thing you have to do, obviously I would have to subtract all the expenses from the $80,000. But the first expense you must deduct first, and you get this out of order, you're going to have the wrong answer. You must deduct the vacancy from the gross income first. And then any other expenses, you can deduct them. It doesn't matter what order you deduct those. But that vacancy rate, in this example, say it was 10% vacancy rate. That 10% is based on the potential gross income. So if you deduct other expenses from that first and then deduct the 10% vacancy, you're deducting off the wrong number here. So you're going to come up with the wrong answer. So when deducting expenses, the first one you have to deduct is vacancy. And then you conduct all the others, whatever other expenses they give you, and it doesn't even matter what order they're in. So anyway, so say the gross income was Yeah, let's say the gross income was 100,000. And the vacancy rate is 10%. Well, what's 10% of 100,000? 10,000, right? So you'd have to deduct that first. So when you subtract the 10,000 from the 100,000, that gives you 90,000, right? And then any other expenses, y'all, you can just start deducting that from the 90,000, again, in any order you want to. But in this example, let's say the net income wound up being 80,000, which is what we actually used in this example on the slide, a net income of 80,000. Y'all, hopefully that makes sense. But the point I'm trying to make is this. Y'all, don't get all bent out of shape if it looks like it's just a long question. Just extract the information you need. In fact, y'all, what you're looking at on the slide, y'all, every time I've ever taken a real estate exam or appraisal exam, and I've taken a lot of them, y'all, as soon as I get to a question and I know it's dealing with capitalization, y'all, I'll go ahead and write out exactly what you see here. Y'all write down, I'll write subject on one side, and then below subject, I'll put NOI, cap, and value. And then over to beside it, I'll put the comparable. And then I'll write down below that NOI, value, and cap. Now I got to fill in the blanks. That's all I'm going to do. I got the formula. Now I'm going to fill in the blanks. And where am I going to get the information from? Right out of the question. That's exactly what I'm going to do. And y'all, for me, it's a lot easier for me. Y'all, if I can see this on my paper, it's just a lot easier for me to digest the information. Y'all, if I'm just trying to hold all this information in my head, that ain't going to work. It won't work for me. Now, some of you may be just smart enough that you can do all of it in your head. But I need to see everything set up in a format that makes sense to me. And this works for me. Y'all, you might say, well, that's going to take time. What, 15 seconds to write that down? To make life easier, and now you just fill in the blanks? Y'all, you know, whatever works for you, y'all go ahead and do it. But I think you'll find this is the easiest way to do it. So y'all, key, memorize the formula. It's just 3 pieces of information you need to know. Got to know the net income. That's always the first thing. And then what am I going to do with it? Divide it by something. And it has to either be the value or the cap rate, one or the other. All right. So now we know how to do capitalization. Now I will tell you, again, that's all you need to know for the real estate exam. Now I will tell you, if you were actually doing, y'all, there's a lot more to this. Y'all, this could get very detailed. But thank God we're not or you're not an appraiser. So you don't need to worry about that. You don't need to worry about it. You just need to know what I just went over with you. Okay. Now let's take a look at the second method to the income approach, and that would be the gross rent multiplier. Again, now this one is much better used for residential properties, like 1 to 4 units. And again, here's the formula. And you'll also notice, again, there's just 3 pieces of information I'm dealing with. That's it. To figure out the gross rent multiplier, you just got to take the sales price divided by the income. Now this time, notice the income's based off monthly income. Y'all, that's a huge distinction here. Be careful. Remember, capitalization deals with annual income. Gross rent multiplier deals with monthly income. Be careful you don't get that confused. But anyway, if you take the sales price divided by the monthly rent, that will give you the gross rent multiplier. But if you're trying to figure out the value of the property, now you take that monthly rent times the gross rent multiplier. And then that will give you the value of the property. So now a couple things before we look at doing an example on this math here. This is one that real estate agents should be using a fair amount, quite frankly. And I'm going to try to help you out here to give you, to put you a little bit ahead or over most agents. Because I'm telling you, a lot of real estate agents are making terrible mistakes here. Say you have an investor that has a rental property, but they've decided they want to sell it. So they contact you or they call you because they were referred to you or you just knew them already, but they want you to list the property and sell it. Now we got to figure out, well, how much can we sell it for? You don't want to use the sales comparison approach to try to put a value on a rental property, an income producing property. Now, I'm not saying you can't use sales or do it, but I would not put much weight at all on sales comparison if it's a rental property, because more than likely you're going to be overpriced. More than likely, good chance, you will be overpriced. You need to apply the gross rent multiplier. And this is very simple, and you're going to see that here in a second. But this is a very simple process to figure out the value. But I want you to understand why you want gross rent multiplier to be used over sales comparison. You got to think about this. If this is a rental property and say there's a tenant living there and there's 3, 4, 5, maybe 6 months still left on their lease. Who do you think might be the typical buyer for that property, given the circumstances we just laid out? An investor. I can't think of anybody that's looking to buy a house to live in is going to give much consideration, if any, to a property that is currently leased to somebody else. You're stuck with the lease, and they're not going to be leaving for the next 4, 5, or 6 months. Maybe longer than that. So you're not likely going to be selling to somebody that plans on living here. The most likely buyer under this scenario would be another investor. Well, if I'm an investor, I don't care what sales comparison says that property's worth. I'm not buying it for that reason. The only thing I'm thinking about as an investor is that ROI. What's the return on the investment, right? That's what I want to know. What's the return going to be? Because, that could be an issue, if you're not paying attention to this kind of stuff. Now, gross rent multiplier. That's what we need to do. So, let's look at a quick example here. Again, this is exactly what I do on the state exam. What I'm about to do right here on this screen, on the slide, is exactly what I do on the exam. If I see a question dealing with gross rent multiplier, I'll already know. Well, first of all, I'll go ahead and write the formula just to make sure we know what it is. But if we're trying to figure out the value, you take the gross rent multiplier times the rent. And again, we know that's monthly rent. And that will give you the value. Now, if I'm trying to figure out what the gross rent multiplier is, then I just take the value divided by the rent, again, monthly rent, and that will give me the gross rent multiplier. So now typically I don't write that part on my scratch paper if I'm taking the test, just because I memorized the formula. But the way I'll set it up is this, because I know that they're going to give me this information. I know they're going to give me a subject property that I'm trying to figure out the value for. And I know there's 3 things I need to know about that property, right? I need to know we're trying to find the value. So if I'm trying to find the value, I know I need the rent. What does it rent for? Now, you would get that from the owner again. What are they renting it for? Monthly rent. Then I got to know the gross rent multiplier. and then I can figure out the value. Y'all, I write that down just like that on my scratch paper. It just works for me. But I also know they're going to give me a comparable property to help me figure out what the gross rent multiplier is. And by the way, let's say the rent was $1,000 a month for the subject. Now I'm trying to figure out this gross rent multiplier, and again, to do that, I need to know the value of the comparable. Again, the value is whatever it sold for. We'll just say it was $100,000. And then I got to know what the monthly rent is. And we're going to say $1,000. Well, no, we're not going to use 1,000 because we use that. Let's say it's 1,200. 1,200 a month. And then that will give me the gross rent multiplier. So, what do we got to do to figure out the gross rent multiplier? Well, again, if you got your calculator, and I'm getting mine out, if you take the value, 100,000, divided by the 1,200 a month, so you should come up with 83.3333 is what I got. And so let's talk about this rounding situation. Y'all, when you're taking the exam, y'all just pay attention to what it tells you to do in the question. Now, I'm getting a gross rent multiplier of 83.333333. It might tell you to round the gross rent multiplier to the nearest whole number, which is what we're going to do here. And in this case, it would be 83. So let me just write that down. 83. But it might tell you to round it to 2 decimal places or 1 decimal place. If they say round it to 1 decimal place, then it's going to be 83.3, right? So just do that part based on whatever it tells you to do in the question. So now I know my gross rent multiplier is 83. So I plug that in with my subject. And now, you just take the $1,000 a month times 83. And, that's pretty simple there, I guess. But, so now we've got a value of $83,000 for that property. Okay? Hopefully that wasn't too bad. I think that's pretty easy. And I think you should be doing it. Now, let me tell you how you can make some money if you'll understand this. First of all, let's make sure we understand exactly what it is this information is telling us. If you look at this subject property, my subject property, you see is $1,000 a month. So, if I collect $1,000 a month, if I'm the investor, I collect $1,000 a month for 83 months, I will have received $83,000. That's what that's telling me. Okay? So why does that matter and how is that useful? Well, if I'm an investor, I might tell you, say, look, I'm looking for some investment or rental property. And I just want you to find me the property. And I will tell you, a lot of, in fact, most of especially your bigger investors, they never even go look at the property. They may not even be living in the same state as you. But a lot of times they don't even go look at the property because they don't care about the property. What does an investor care about? The income or the return of the income. So they just care about the numbers. Well, as an investor, I might tell you I'm looking for a property that will pay for itself in, say, 9 years. I'm just throwing out a number here, okay? But, so what does that mean? Well, if they want it paid for in 9 years, well, how many months are in 9 years? Well, I'm showing 108. So 9 times 12 months will be 108 months. So y'all, what they just told you, I want you to find a property with a gross rent multiplier of at least 108, 108. So y'all, so if I come in here and say I plug in my gross rent multiplier of 108, and y'all, the rent is $1,000 a month, y'all, in this example, then what would the value be for me? Well, if I take the 108 times the $1,000, then that would be $108,000. So, yeah, I would be willing to pay, good grief, up to $108,000 for that property. So, in essence, yeah, if it's on the market for anything under 108, or at least $108,000 or less, make the offer. That meets my requirement. Just make the offer. You know, I'm telling you, investors are making offers on property all the time. Well, let's say because my gross rent multiplier is 108 and the rent was $1,000, y'all, obviously the most I'd be willing to pay is $108,000. But y'all, what if this property was on the market for $115,000? Does that meet my investor's requirement? Well, no. 115 is over the 108,000 they'd be willing to pay. But are we close enough to make an offer? I know you're asking 115, but hey, would you take 105? And then maybe we can negotiate it to not go over to 108. Y'all, so my point is, y'all, this is what you get paid for. Y'all, you need to try to negotiate the sales price down to what you know your investor would be willing to pay, right? Y'all, based on the income of that property. So, y'all, I just think this is a huge missed opportunity for most real estate agents because they don't understand this gross rent multiplier, and it's very simple. I don't think you can debate that. Y'all, it's a very simple process to come up with the value. And quite frankly, it's easier than sales comparison. Because with sales, y'all, I won't get into all that. All right, but anyway, y'all, that's how gross rent multiplier works. We also talked about the capitalization approach. So, y'all, that's the two methods to the income approach to value. Now, there's one more approach to value we need to talk about, and that would be the cost approach. And, we're not going to, you'll find that that's probably the least desired approach when trying to figure out value. But we're going to talk more about this cost approach and how that works in the next hour.